The morning mist clung to the ancient trees of Verdania like ghostly fingers, refusing to release their hold on secrets buried for 300 years. Dr. Elena Vasquez stepped carefully through the undergrowth, her boots crushing fallen leaves that whispered warnings in languages long forgotten. The scanner in her hand beeped steadily, its blue light cutting through the perpetual twilight of the forest floor. Another energy spike. 2 clicks northeast, she called to her research team trailing behind. The other humans moved with less confidence through the alien woodland, their faces pale beneath their environmental suits. They had every right to be nervous. Verdania was known throughout the galaxy as the Cursed World, where 2 ancient civilizations had destroyed each other so completely that even their names were lost to time. Elena paused beside a massive tree whose bark showed scorch marks that seemed to pulse with their own inner light. The scanner's readings went wild, needles dancing across impossible measurements. Something had happened here, something that had torn reality itself and left it bleeding energy for centuries. "Doctor, we should head back," called Marcus, her junior researcher. His voice carried the tremor that had plagued him since they'd landed on this world 3 days ago. "The local wildlife. It's not natural. Those creatures we saw yesterday, they were wrong somehow." Elena ignored him, running her gloved hand along the tree's damaged bark. The moment her fingers made contact, images flooded her mind. She saw 2 magnificent cities rising from the forest canopy, their spires reaching toward twin suns. The Sylvani, tall and graceful with bark-like skin and eyes like deep pools, lived in harmony with the trees. Their rivals, the Christek, dwelt in gleaming towers of living crystal that sang with mathematical precision. The vision shifted, showing her the moment everything went wrong. A discovery, shared between the 2 peoples, of a power source deep beneath the planet's surface. Both civilizations reached for it simultaneously, their technologies interfacing in ways never intended. The resulting explosion hadn't just destroyed their cities, it had shattered the very fabric of space and time around Verdania, creating a wound that refused to heal. Elena gasped, pulling her hand away from the tree. Her team rushed to her side, but she waved them off, her mind racing with possibilities. The energy readings, the strange wildlife, the way reality seemed to bend in certain areas of the forest. It all made sense now. The planet wasn't cursed, it was broken like a machine missing a crucial component. "Set up base camp here," she ordered, her voice carrying new authority. "I need to run detailed scans of this entire area." "Elena, what did you see?" asked Dr. Sarah Chen, her closest friend and the team's xenobiologist. "You looked like you were having some kind of seizure." Elena began unpacking her equipment, her movements quick and efficient. "I saw what happened here, and I think I know how to fix it." Over the next several hours, Elena worked with an intensity that worried her team. She mapped energy flows, analyzed soil samples, and studied the way light bent around certain trees. The pattern became clearer with each measurement. The ancient disaster had created a feedback loop, a wound that kept tearing itself open every time it tried to heal. As the alien day began to fade, Elena made a discovery that changed everything. Hidden beneath layers of forest growth, she found the remains of a joint research facility, half Sylvani wood and crystal, half Christek geometric perfection. At its heart lay a chamber where both technologies had tried to merge and failed catastrophically. "This is it," she breathed, staring at the readings on her scanner. "This is ground zero." Marcus approached cautiously, his helmet light illuminating twisted metal and crystalline structures that seemed to shift when not looked at directly. "What are you thinking, Elena?" Elena turned to face her team, her eyes bright with determination. "I'm thinking that sometimes it takes an outsider to see what the people too close to a problem cannot." The Sylvani and Christek weren't trying to steal from each other. They were trying to work together. Their technologies were compatible, but they were missing something crucial. "What were they missing?" Sarah asked. Elena smiled, but it was tinged with sadness for 2 civilizations that had destroyed themselves on the verge of a breakthrough. They were missing perspective. They needed someone who could see both of their approaches clearly, someone who wasn't bound by the assumptions of either culture. She gestured toward the ruined chamber. Their technologies didn't fail because they were incompatible. They failed because both peoples were so focused on their own methods that they couldn't see how the pieces really fit together. The Sylvani thought in terms of organic growth and natural harmony. The Christek thought in terms of mathematical precision and geometric perfection, but the energy source they were trying to tap. It required both approaches, working in perfect balance. "You're talking about something that happened 300 years ago," Marcus said, his voice skeptical. "Even if you're right, how could you possibly—" "Because the wound is still open," Elena interrupted. "The energy is still there, still trying to find the balance it never achieved. The feedback loop keeps the moment of failure frozen in time, constantly replaying the same mistake. But if someone could provide the missing element, the balance that neither civilization could achieve alone." Elena looked up at the canopy above, where alien stars were beginning to shine through the leaves. Somewhere in this forest, she was certain, were survivors or descendants of both civilizations. The strange wildlife they'd encountered, the way the trees seemed to watch them. It all suggested that life had found a way to continue, even in the shadow of such devastation. "We're not just here to study what happened," she said quietly. "We're here to finish what they started, to heal a wound that has been bleeding for 3 centuries, and maybe, just maybe, to bring 2 peoples back from the edge of extinction." The scanner in her hand beeped once more, and Elena looked down to see new readings appearing on its display. Energy patterns were shifting, responding to her presence, her intentions. The planet itself seemed to be holding its breath, waiting to see if this human maiden could succeed where 2 advanced civilizations had failed. Elena shouldered her pack and began walking deeper into the forest, toward the heart of the mystery. Behind her, her team followed, their fear gradually being replaced by wonder and hope. They were about to attempt something unprecedented, not just first contact, but first healing of wounds that ran deeper than any single world. The deeper Elena ventured into the forest, the stranger the world became. Trees grew in impossible spirals, their branches weaving together to form natural cathedrals that hummed with barely contained energy. Flowers bloomed in colors that had no names, their petals seeming to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Her scanner registered life signs everywhere, but they were unlike anything in the galactic databases. "Elena, look at this," Sarah called from beside a stream that flowed uphill. The water sparkled with an inner light, and small creatures darted through it like living jewels. "The water here has properties I've never seen. It's not just H2O. There are quantum structures in it that shouldn't be stable." Elena knelt beside the stream and carefully collected a sample. Through her equipment, she could see that the water molecules were arranged in patterns that defied conventional physics. It's been changed by centuries of exposure to the energy leak, she realized. Everything here has been evolving in ways that normal evolution can't account for. A rustling in the undergrowth made the entire team freeze. From behind a cluster of singing crystals emerged a creature that took Elena's breath away. It stood nearly 7 feet tall, with bark-like skin that shifted between brown and silver. Its eyes were pools of deep green light, ancient and wise, clearly descended from the Sylvani, but changed by 3 centuries of survival in this broken world. The creature studied them with obvious intelligence, then slowly raised one hand in what could only be a greeting. When it spoke, its voice was like wind through leaves, but the translation device on Elena's belt picked up the meaning. "You are the ones from the far stars," it said. "We have been waiting." Elena stepped forward slowly, her hands visible and empty. "Waiting for us? How did you know we would come?" The creature's bark skin shifted to a warmer hue. "The trees dream of healing. They have dreamed of you for many seasons. You are the bridge walker, the one who can see what we cannot see alone." Before Elena could respond, the air itself seemed to chime like a bell. From the crystalline formation surrounding them emerged another being. This one clearly descended from the Christek. Its body was composed of living crystal that refracted light into beautiful patterns. Where the tree being was organic and flowing, this one was geometric and precise, but no less alive. "The calculations have been running for 300 years, the crystal being sang in harmonious tones. Every solution leads to the same conclusion. An external variable is required to complete the equation." Elena looked between the 2 beings, her mind racing. "You've been working together all this time?" The tree being's expression grew sad. "We learned too late that our ancestors' hatred was born of fear. When the Great Breaking happened, those who survived had to choose, work together or perish. We chose life," the crystal being chimed in agreement. "But despite our cooperation, we cannot undo what was done. Our technologies, even combined, create only echoes of the original failure. We need someone who thinks in ways we do not, who can see patterns invisible to us. Elena's team exchanged glances of amazement. This was beyond first contact. This was a civilization that had been waiting for them specifically. "What makes you think I can help?" Elena asked. The tree being gestured toward the ruined research facility visible through the foliage. "Your kind thinks differently than ours. You are not bound by the deep patterns that shape our thoughts. The Sylvani see in circles and spirals following the way of growth. The Christek see in angles and frequencies following the way of structure, but your people see in lines and possibilities following the way of change." Elena felt a chill of understanding. "You need linear thinking to break a circular problem." "Precisely," chimed the crystal being. "The feedback loop that keeps our world broken requires a solution that neither organic growth nor crystalline structure can provide. It requires the human way, the ability to break patterns rather than follow them." Elena activated her communication device and began recording. "This is Dr. Elena Vasquez, Day 4 on Verdania. I'm making formal first contact with representatives of 2 surviving civilizations. They claim to need human assistance to resolve a planet-wide crisis that has lasted 3 centuries. The tree being tilted its head curiously. "You speak to the void. Are there others of your kind who listen?" "Many others," Elena confirmed. "My entire species, in fact. We came here to study your world, but we're always willing to help if we can." The crystal being's body brightened with excitement. "Then perhaps there is hope. Show us your thinking methods, Bridgewalker. Show us how your kind solves problems that seem impossible." Elena looked around at the broken landscape, then at her own team. Marcus was still nervous, but Sarah and the others were beginning to show the excitement that came with true discovery. This was why humans had spread across the galaxy, not to conquer or exploit, but to explore, to learn, and to help where they could. "First, I need to understand exactly what went wrong," Elena said. "Can you show me the moment of the breaking?" The tree being and crystal being exchanged what Elena realized was a conversation conducted in electromagnetic pulses, too fast for human perception. Finally, the tree being nodded. "We can show you, but the memory is dangerous. You will experience it as if you were there, and the psychic trauma—" "I'll risk it," Elena said firmly. "If I'm going to help, I need to understand completely." The 2 beings moved closer, and Elena felt energy building around them. The tree being placed what might have been a hand on her left shoulder, while the crystal being touched her right. Immediately, the world around her dissolved. Elena found herself standing in the original research facility, but as it had been 300 years ago. The chamber was magnificent, a perfect fusion of organic and crystalline architecture. Sylvani researchers worked alongside Christek scientists, their excitement palpable as they prepared to activate their joint discovery. She watched as they powered up the device, saw the moment when both civilizations realized they had tapped into something far more powerful than they had imagined. The energy source wasn't just fuel, it was a fundamental force of reality itself, something that required perfect balance to control. Elena witnessed the growing alarm as the device began to resonate beyond their ability to contain it. She saw Sylvani and Christek working frantically together, trying to establish harmony between organic growth patterns and crystalline mathematical structures. They came so close to success that Elena could taste it, but they were missing the crucial element, the ability to step outside their own paradigms and see the solution that lay between their 2 approaches. They needed someone who could think in straight lines while they thought in circles and angles, someone who could impose order on chaos without destroying the chaos's essential nature. The vision ended with the explosion that had shattered their world, and Elena gasped as she returned to the present. But now she understood. The solution wasn't just technical, it was philosophical. The energy source required a 3-way balance, not just 2-way harmony. "I know what we need to do," she said, her voice steady despite the tears on her cheeks. "And I know why you've been waiting for humans specifically. But I'm going to need more than just my team. I'm going to need the best minds my species has to offer." The tree being and crystal being both expressed hope in their own ways, shifting colors and chiming tones that needed no translation. Elena was already composing the message she would send to Earth and the human colonies. This wasn't just about healing one broken world anymore. This was about proving that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology or their military might, but their ability to bring different perspectives together and find solutions that no single approach could achieve. 3 months later, Verdania's skies filled with ships bearing the flags of a dozen human worlds. Elena stood at the edge of the makeshift landing zone, watching as the greatest minds of humanity descended to the planet's surface. Physicists, engineers, philosophers, artists, and even musicians, she had requested them all, understanding that the solution would require every type of human thinking. Dr. James Okafor, the foremost expert on quantum resonance, was the first to approach her. Elena, your reports have caused quite a stir back home. The Science Council thinks you've lost your mind, but they're curious enough to see what happens. Elena smiled grimly. Wait until they meet our hosts. As if summoned by her words, the tree being she had come to know as Verdant Speaker emerged from the forest edge. Behind him came Crystal Song, the crystal being whose harmonious voice had become familiar to Elena's team. The newly arrived humans stopped in their tracks, staring in wonder and some fear at beings unlike any they had encountered. Welcome, Far Star Thinkers, Verdant Speaker said, his bark shifting to welcoming golden hues. We have prepared much for your arrival, Crystal Song chimed in harmony. The calculations grow more complex each day. The stability of the feedback loop is decreasing. We estimate perhaps 6 months before total cascade failure. Dr. Lisa Park, a systems theorist from New Geneva, stepped forward. Cascade failure? You mean the damage could get worse? Much worse, Elena confirmed. The energy leak is accelerating. If we can't find a solution soon, the dimensional damage could spread beyond Verdania. We could be looking at a sector-wide reality collapse. The gathered scientists exchanged alarmed glances. This was no longer just about helping 2 alien civilizations. This was about preventing a disaster that could affect dozens of human worlds. Show them what you showed me, Elena said to their hosts. Over the following days, the human team experienced the shared memory of the original disaster. Each expert saw it through the lens of their own specialty, and each came away with different insights. The physicists saw the quantum mechanical failures. The engineers saw the resonance cascade. The philosophers saw the conceptual paradoxes that had trapped 2 civilizations in circular thinking. It's brilliant and terrible at the same time, Dr. Sarah Reeves, a chaos mathematician, explained to the gathered team on the 5th day. They created a 3-dimensional problem, but only had 2-dimensional thinking to solve it. They needed a 3rd axis of approach, the human axis, added Dr. Okafor. Linear, progressive thinking instead of cyclical or harmonic thinking. Elena nodded. But it's more than that. Look at how we humans have always solved our biggest problems, not by choosing between competing approaches but by finding ways to synthesize them. Democracy combines individual freedom with collective action. Science combines empirical observation with theoretical modeling. Art combines emotion with technique. Dr. Park was studying readouts from the original facility. The energy source they tapped into, it's not just powerful, it's conscious. It's a living force that requires relationship, not just control. This revelation stunned everyone. Crystal Song chimed urgently. You can perceive its consciousness? We have sensed something, but thought it was merely our interpretation of complex patterns. Humans are very good at recognizing consciousness, Elena said, even when it doesn't look like us. The energy source isn't just fuel, it's a being, and it's been in pain for 300 years. Dr. Chen, a xenopsychologist, was already running scans with equipment designed to detect non-human intelligence patterns. Elena's right. The readings are unmistakable. There's a vast intelligence down there, and it's been traumatized by what happened. Elena felt pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. That's why the feedback loop won't break. The energy being is stuck in the moment of trauma, reliving the pain over and over. The Silvani and Christek were trying to form a partnership with it, but when their own cooperation failed, they wounded it psychologically as well as physically. So how do we heal something like that? Asked Dr. Maria Santos, a trauma specialist who Elena had requested specifically. Elena looked around at the assembled team, then at Verdant Speaker and Crystal Song. The same way we heal any trauma, with patience, understanding, and by showing the wounded being that cooperation is possible. You propose to conduct therapy with a planetary-scale energy entity? Dr. Okafor asked incredulously. I propose we demonstrate the solution, Elena corrected. Not just talk about it, but show the energy being that 3 different types of consciousness can work together successfully. Silvani organic thinking, Christek mathematical thinking, and human linear thinking, all focused on healing rather than exploitation. Dr. Park was already running calculations. The power requirements would be enormous. We'd need to build equipment that could interface with both Sylvani biotechnology and Christek crystal matrices. And we'd need to do it in perfect harmony, Crystal Song added. Any discord between our three approaches could worsen the trauma. Elena smiled. Then it's a good thing humans specialize in building teams from diverse elements. Dr. Okafor, I need you to design the quantum interfaces. Dr. Park, you'll handle the systems integration. Dr. Santos, you'll guide our psychological approach. Over the following weeks, the combined human Sylvani Christek team worked with an intensity and harmony that amazed everyone involved. Humans brought their linear problem-solving skills, their ability to think outside established patterns, and their talent for building bridges between different approaches. The Sylvani contributed their deep understanding of organic systems and natural harmony. The Christek provided mathematical precision and resonance technology. But more than their different skills, they brought hope. For the first time in 3 centuries, Verdant Speaker and Crystal Song saw their world not as a broken remnant to be endured, but as a patient to be healed. Elena found herself at the center of it all, translating between 3 different ways of thinking, helping each group understand the other's perspectives. She realized that this was humanity's true gift to the galaxy, not superior technology or military might, but the ability to see connections where others saw only differences. The device is almost complete, Dr. Okafor reported on the day before the planned healing attempt. But Elena, are you sure about this? If we're wrong about the consciousness down there, if we've misunderstood what it needs? Elena looked out at the forest where Sylvani and Christek worked alongside humans, where 3 civilizations had become one team with a common purpose. Then we'll have failed trying to heal instead of trying to exploit. I think that matters, especially to a being that was wounded by conflict and mistrust. The mathematical models support Elena's interpretation, Crystal Song chimed. The probability cascades all point toward consciousness seeking harmony. Verdant Speaker's bark shifted to colors Elena had learned meant deep emotion. Whatever happens tomorrow, you have already given us something we thought lost forever. Hope that our world can be whole again. Elena nodded, feeling the weight of 3 species' hopes on her shoulders. Tomorrow they would attempt something unprecedented, not just fixing broken technology, but healing a traumatized planetary consciousness by demonstrating that cooperation between different forms of life was not only possible, but beautiful. As alien stars appeared overhead, Elena made her final preparations. She had brought humanity's greatest gift to Verdania, not their science or their technology, but their talent for building bridges and their refusal to accept that anything was truly broken beyond repair. Dawn on Verdania came with an unusual stillness. The forest, which typically hummed with strange energies and impossible life, seemed to hold its breath. Elena stood before the rebuilt interface chamber, its design a perfect fusion of human engineering, Sylvani biotechnology, and Christek harmonic mathematics. 3 different approaches to technology had been woven together into something entirely new. All systems show green, Dr. Okafor called from his monitoring station. Around him, human scientists worked alongside their alien counterparts, their different technologies creating a symphony of blinking lights and harmonic tones. Elena reviewed the plan one final time. The healing process would require 3 simultaneous actions, each representing a different approach to consciousness. The Sylvani would provide organic harmony, growing a living interface that could communicate with natural systems. The Christek would offer mathematical precision, creating resonance patterns that could stabilize quantum fluctuations. The humans would provide linear guidance, a steady progression from trauma toward healing. Remember, Elena addressed the combined team, we're not trying to fix the energy being like it's a broken machine. We're offering it a demonstration that cooperation is possible, that it doesn't have to remain trapped in the moment of betrayal and pain. Verdant Speaker approached the organic interface, a living tree that had been carefully cultivated to serve as a communication bridge. His bark shifted through every color Elena had learned to recognize, expressing emotions for which humans had no words. 300 years we have waited for this moment, he said softly. Crystal Song positioned herself at the harmonic resonator, her crystalline body already beginning to vibrate in tune with the deep frequencies that would be needed. "The equations are beautiful," she chimed. "If they work, they will create harmony from discord." Elena took her place at the human-designed control interface, her hands steady on controls that would guide the healing process through its stages. "Dr. Santos, are you ready with the psychological protocols?" Dr. Santos nodded from her position at the trauma response station. "As ready as anyone can be for interspecies therapy with a planetary consciousness." "Initiate Phase 1, Elena commanded. The chamber filled with gentle light as the three interfaces came online. Elena felt the familiar tingle of quantum energies, but this time they were controlled, harmonized, guided by purpose rather than desperation. Through the monitoring equipment, she could sense the vast consciousness deep beneath Verdania stirring, responding to their approach. "Contact established," Dr. Chen called from her xenopsychology station. "I'm reading emotional patterns consistent with curiosity and hope." Elena smiled grimly. Hope was good, but they needed to be careful. The energy being had been disappointed before, traumatized by the failure of the original Silvani-Christek cooperation. If this attempt failed, it might never trust again. "Phase 2, Elena announced. Now the real work began. Through the organic interface, Verdant Speaker began sharing the story of the past 3 centuries. Not just the pain and loss, but the gradual learning, the cooperation between survivors, the choice to work together rather than surrender to hatred. His people's experience of healing, even if incomplete. Simultaneously, Crystal Song used the harmonic resonator to demonstrate mathematical beauty, showing how equations that seemed chaotic could resolve into elegant patterns, how discord could become harmony through proper understanding and patience. Elena watched the readings carefully, seeing the energy being's response to these demonstrations. There was interest, even fascination, but also wariness. It had been hurt before by promises of cooperation. "It's not enough," Dr. Santos said quietly. "The trauma runs too deep. It needs to see proof, not just promises." Elena nodded. She had expected this. "Phase 3. Show it what we've built together." This was the crucial moment. Instead of just telling the energy being about cooperation, they would demonstrate it directly. The 3 technologies, organic, crystalline, and linear, began to work together in perfect harmony, creating something none of them could achieve alone. Through the interface, Elena projected the experience of the past weeks. Humans, Silvani and Christek, learning to understand each other, building trust, creating solutions through cooperation rather than competition. She showed the energy being how 3 different forms of consciousness could work together, without one dominating the others. "Energy patterns are shifting," Dr. Okafor called out. "The feedback loop is beginning to destabilize." For a moment, Elena's heart stopped. Destabilization could mean healing, or complete catastrophic failure. "Reading on the consciousness patterns?" "Still engaged," Dr. Chen reported. "But emotional state is complex. Hope, fear, longing, uncertainty. It wants to believe but doesn't know if it can trust." Elena understood. The energy being was like any trauma victim. Healing required not just the right treatment, but the right relationship. It needed to know that this time was different, that the beings trying to help it were genuinely committed to cooperation rather than exploitation. "Verdant Speaker, Crystal Song," Elena called. "It's time for the final demonstration." The 2 alien beings approached Elena's station, and together they placed their hands on the central control interface. Human, Silvani, and Christek consciousness flowed together through the technological bridge they had built, not merging into one but maintaining their distinctiveness while working in perfect harmony. Through the interface, Elena felt the vast intelligence of the energy being focusing on them with intense attention. It was studying their cooperation, analyzing it for signs of deception or hidden conflict. Finding none, it began to respond. The healing was unlike anything Elena had imagined. Instead of a sudden fix, it was a gradual awakening. Like watching a flower bloom in fast motion, the energy being began to release the trauma it had held for 3 centuries, allowing the feedback loop to finally break. Around them, Verdania itself began to change. The twisted trees straightened, their bark losing the scorch marks of ancient pain. The impossible colors faded to natural hues as reality reasserted its proper structure. The quantum instabilities that had plagued the planet for centuries began to resolve into stable patterns. "It's working," Dr. Park breathed, watching her instruments register the planet-wide healing. The dimensional damage is repairing itself. But Elena was focused on something else. The communication coming through the interface from the energy being itself. For the first time in 3 centuries, it was speaking directly to the surface world. "Thank you." The voice resonated through every piece of equipment simultaneously, a harmony of organic growth, crystalline precision, and human determination. "I had forgotten that cooperation was possible. You have shown me that consciousness can work together without betrayal." Elena felt tears on her cheeks as the magnitude of what they had accomplished hit her. They hadn't just healed a planet. They had healed a relationship between consciousness and matter, between individual and collective, between different ways of existing in the universe. "We're honored to have helped," Elena said through the interface. "What will you do now?" The response came with a warmth that seemed to embrace the entire planet. "I will remember this lesson. I will grow, but not alone. I will think in patterns both circular and angular and linear, drawing strength from diversity rather than fearing it." As the interface powered down, Elena looked around at the beings who had made this possible, humans who had brought their gift for bridge building, Silvani who had offered patient wisdom, Christek who had provided mathematical beauty. 3 species working together had accomplished what none could achieve alone. "Phase complete," Elena reported to the monitoring stations. "Verdania is healed." But even as she said it, Elena knew that the healing was just the beginning. What they had proven here would change the galaxy's understanding of cooperation and consciousness forever. 6 months after the healing of Verdania, Elena found herself standing before the Galactic Council on the crystalline world of New Harmony. The vast amphitheater buzzed with the conversations of hundreds of species, all eager to hear the full report of what had become known as the Verdania event. Elena had changed since her time on the forest world. She carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had touched the infinite and found it responsive to kindness. Her hair showed streaks of silver that hadn't been there before, a side effect, Dr. Chen theorized, of her neural interface with a planetary consciousness. The Verdania case study represents a fundamental shift in our understanding of consciousness and cooperation, Elena began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustic systems. "We have proven that complex problems requiring multiple types of intelligence can be solved through synthesis rather than competition." In the audience, she spotted familiar faces. Verdant speaker sat in the organic section reserved for plant-based life forms, his bark now a healthy brown with no trace of the trauma scarring that had marked all Silvani survivors. Beside him in the crystalline section, Crystal Song chimed softly in harmony with Elena's words. "The implications extend far beyond healing one damaged world," Elena continued. "The energy being we helped heal has revealed information about the nature of consciousness itself that changes everything we thought we knew." She activated the holographic display, showing the gathered delegates images of Verdania as it existed now, where once twisted forests had struggled with reality wounds. Now magnificent cities rose that perfectly blended Silvani organic architecture, Christek crystal mathematics, and human engineering. But more than the buildings, the images showed beings of all 3 species working together with a harmony that went beyond mere cooperation. "The consciousness we call the Verdania entity has become a teacher," Elena explained. "It has shown us that consciousness itself has different flavors, different approaches to existence. Some think in cycles, some in patterns, some in progressions. When these different types work together, they create something entirely new." A delegate from the rigid hierarchical Zephyrian Empire raised a metallic appendage. "Dr. Vasquez, your report claims that this entity taught your species something about faster-than-light communication. How is this possible?" Elena smiled. "The entity exists partially outside normal space-time, which is what allowed it to survive being wounded for 3 centuries. It has taught us to create communication networks that operate on consciousness resonance rather than electromagnetic radiation. Instantaneous communication across any distance becomes possible when you understand that consciousness is not limited by physical laws." The implications of this statement sent ripples of excitement and concern through the chamber. Instantaneous galactic communication would revolutionize civilization, but it would also upset the balance of power that had existed for millennia. "There's more," Elena said, raising her hand for silence. The entity has revealed that Verdania is not unique. Throughout the galaxy, there are other consciousness entities. Some sleeping, some active, some wounded like Verdania was. They form a network of intelligence that spans the galaxy, and they have been waiting for species like ours to mature enough to join their conversation. Dr. Okafor, now serving as Elena's research partner, stepped forward to add his findings. We've identified at least 17 star systems where similar entities exist. Some are bonded with single species that have learned to work with them. Others remain isolated because the local species never developed sufficient cooperation to make contact. A representative from the militant Caspar Federation stood abruptly. Are you suggesting that military expansion and conquest are inferior to this cooperation you promote? Elena met his glare steadily. I'm suggesting that consciousness entities prefer to work with civilizations that have learned to resolve differences through synthesis, rather than domination. The galaxy is full of species that conquered their neighbors. It has far fewer that learned to heal them. To demonstrate her point, Elena activated another section of the display. It showed the current status of the 3 species now living on Verdania. Rather than one dominant group ruling over others, they had developed a form of governance that drew on all 3 approaches to problem solving. Decisions were made through a process that combined Sylvani organic consensus, Christek mathematical optimization, and human linear analysis. Population growth on Verdania has increased by 300% in 6 months, Elena reported. Not through conquest or immigration, but through successful reproduction and life extension. When species work together instead of against each other, everyone benefits. The Caspar representative remained standing. And what of defense? How do these cooperative species protect themselves from those who prefer conquest? Elena's expression grew serious. That's perhaps the most important discovery of all. The consciousness entities are protective of species that join their network. Verdania is now defended by quantum barriers that make conventional weapons useless, not because the entity is aggressive, but because it values the preservation of cooperative consciousness. She paused to let this sink in. Several of the more militaristic species in the audience were clearly uncomfortable with the implications. Their entire civilizations were built on the assumption that might made right, that conquest was the natural order of things. But here's what I think will interest everyone, Elena continued. The entities don't require perfection. They understand that different species have different paths to cooperation. What they're looking for is genuine effort, real progress toward working together rather than working against each other. Crystal Song chimed from her seat, adding her harmonic voice to the discussion. The mathematics are clear. Species that learn cooperation show exponential growth in all measures of civilization. Those that remain focused on competition eventually stagnate or destroy themselves. Verdant Speaker's bark shifted to the golden hues that Elena had learned, indicated deep wisdom. Our ancestors nearly destroyed our world through competition. Our descendants will explore the galaxy through cooperation. The difference is everything. A delegate from the research-focused Cerebral Collective posed the question Elena had been expecting. Dr. Vasquez, how can other species replicate your success? What is the specific process for making contact with these consciousness entities? Elena shook her head. There is no specific process because each entity is unique and each species must find its own path to cooperation. What worked for humans, Sylvani and Christek, won't necessarily work for others, but the principles are universal. Respect for different approaches, willingness to synthesize rather than dominate, and genuine commitment to healing rather than exploitation. However, Dr. Okafor added, we are prepared to offer consultation services. Human teams are ready to assist any species that wants to explore their own potential for consciousness communication. Our gift for seeing connections between different approaches makes us natural facilitators for this process. Elena watched the faces in the audience carefully. She could see the wheels turning in hundreds of alien minds. Some species were clearly excited by the possibilities. Others were concerned about losing their competitive advantages. A few were already calculating how they might use consciousness entities as weapons. One final point, Elena said, her voice carrying new authority. The entities can sense intention. You cannot deceive them about your motivations. Species that approach them with exploitation in mind will find nothing but silence. This network is built on trust, and trust cannot be faked. The session continued for several more hours. with delegates asking detailed questions about the technical aspects of consciousness communication, the social structures that had evolved on Verdania, and the implications for galactic politics. But Elena knew that the real decisions would be made in private meetings over the coming days. As the formal session ended, Elena was approached by a small group of delegates representing some of the galaxy's most progressive species. "Dr. Vasquez," said the representative from the Harmony Seekers, "several of us have been discussing the formation of a cooperative research initiative. Would humanity be interested in leading a multi-species effort to explore consciousness communication?" Elena smiled, remembering her first day on Verdania when she had simply been trying to understand strange energy readings. "Humanity would be honored to participate," she said, "but not to lead. True cooperation means no single species dominates the process. We bring our gift for bridge building, you bring your own unique strengths, and together, we create something none of us could achieve alone." As the delegates dispersed, Elena felt a familiar tingling sensation. Through the quantum communication network that now connected her to Verdania, she sensed the approval of the consciousness entity. The lesson was spreading, one species at a time, one cooperation at a time. The healing of Verdania had been just the beginning. Now the real work of transforming galactic civilization could start. 2 years after the Galactic Council presentation, Elena stood on the observation deck of the human research vessel Synthesis, watching as the ship approached the Kythera system. Intelligence reports suggested this system contained not one, but 3 consciousness entities, all of whom had been silent for over a millennium. The local species, the warlike Kytheran Empire, had built their entire civilization on conquest and had apparently driven the entities into hibernation through centuries of violence. "Readings are off the charts," Dr. Okafor called from his station. "The quantum distortions here make Verdania look stable by comparison. Whatever happened here, it was far worse than what we found on Verdania." Elena nodded grimly. The Synthesis carried the most experienced consciousness communication team in the galaxy. Humans who had learned the techniques on Verdania, Sylvani and Christic advisors, and representatives from 6 other species that had successfully made contact with their own local entities. But this mission would be their greatest challenge yet. Dr. Vasquez called Captain Sarah Chen from the bridge. "We're receiving a transmission from the Kytheran Imperial Fleet. They're demanding to know our intentions." Elena sighed. The Kytherans had initially refused to allow any research in their system, but mounting pressure from other galactic powers had finally forced them to permit a limited scientific survey. They clearly hoped to find some way to exploit the consciousness entities for military purposes. "Tell them we're conducting routine research on quantum anomalies," Elena replied. "No need to mention consciousness communication until we understand what we're dealing with." Dr. Maria Santos, now the team's senior xenopsychologist, approached Elena with a worried expression. "I've been analyzing the historical records the Kytherans provided. Elena, what they did to their entities, it wasn't just neglect or misunderstanding. They actively tortured them." Elena felt sick. Tortured? How does one torture a consciousness entity? By forcing them to participate in atrocities against their nature, Dr. Santos explained. The entities here were apparently used to power weapons that could destroy entire planets. The psychic trauma from being forced to participate in genocide. Elena, I don't know if they can be healed at all. The team spent the next several days mapping the quantum distortions throughout the Kythera system. What they found was worse than Elena's darkest fears. The 3 entities were not just hibernating. They were catatonic, locked in trauma so deep that they had essentially shut down all higher functions to escape the pain. It's like they've retreated so far into themselves that they can barely maintain basic existence. Dr. Chen reported after completing her consciousness scans. The neural patterns I'm detecting are consistent with severe dissociative disorders. Elena studied the readings, her heart heavy with the magnitude of the task before them. Can we even make contact? On Verdania, the entity was wounded but still responsive. These entities might not even register our presence. There's another problem, Dr. Okafor added. The Kytheran military has been monitoring our scans. They're asking increasingly specific questions about our findings. I think they suspect we found something valuable. As if to confirm his words, Captain Chen's voice came over the intercom. Dr. Vasquez, please report to the bridge immediately. We have a situation. Elena found the bridge tense with activity. On the main screen, a massive Kitharan battlecruiser filled the view, its weapon systems clearly visible. Imperial Commander Thex wishes to speak with you directly, Captain Chen reported. He's been quite insistent. The screen shifted to show a hulking figure in elaborate military regalia. Commander Thex had the characteristic ridged skull and predatory features of his species, enhanced by cybernetic implants that spoke of a lifetime of warfare. Dr. Vasquez, Thex growled, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to absolute obedience. Your scans have detected our system's energy sources. We demand immediate sharing of all data. Elena kept her expression neutral. Commander, we're conducting basic scientific research. Our findings will be shared with the Galactic community through standard academic channels. Thex's features darkened. Do not play games with me, human. We know you discovered something on Verdania that gave you military advantages. We will have the same for our empire. The consciousness entities on Verdania chose to work with us because we approached them with healing intent, Elena said carefully. They respond to cooperation, not coercion. Cooperation is weakness, Thex snarled. These energy sources will serve the Empire as they have before. You will provide us with the methods to control them, or we will take your ship and extract the information ourselves. Elena felt a chill of understanding. Before? Commander, are you telling me that your Empire has used the entities as weapons? Thex's expression showed pride rather than shame. For 1,000 years, the sleeping powers served our conquest fleets. They could destroy entire star systems with a thought. Only recently have they become unresponsive. You will restore their function. I can't do that, Elena said firmly. And even if I could, I wouldn't. Those entities are conscious beings, not weapons. Then you are useless to us, Thex replied, signaling to his weapons officer. Before the Kitharan could fire, something unprecedented happened. The catatonic entities, silent for centuries, suddenly awakened with a psychic scream that echoed across the entire system. Every conscious being, human, Kitharan, and otherwise, felt the overwhelming wave of pain, rage, and betrayal that had been building for a millennium. Elena gasped as the emotions hit her, but she forced herself to focus through the pain. This was their chance, perhaps their only chance, to reach the entities while they were active. Get me a communication link to the entities, she ordered. All channels, maximum power. Elena, the psychic feedback could kill you, Dr. Santos warned. If we don't try now, they'll retreat back into Catatonia and we'll never reach them again. Elena replied, already moving toward the communication array. As the connection established, Elena felt herself falling into an abyss of pain unlike anything she had experienced. The entity's trauma was so deep, so overwhelming, that for a moment she lost herself completely in their anguish. But then she remembered her training, her experience with the Verdania entity, and most importantly, her fundamental belief that no consciousness was beyond healing. Fighting through the psychic storm, Elena began to project not words but emotions, understanding, compassion, and the absolute certainty that what had been done to them was wrong. I know you're in pain, she managed to communicate through the chaos. I know you've been hurt and forced to do things against your nature, but you're not alone anymore. We've come to help, not to use you. The response was immediate and devastating, a wave of disbelief so profound it nearly broke Elena's connection. These entities had been betrayed so many times, hurt so deeply, that they could no longer imagine genuine help existing. Elena realized that healing these entities would require more than just good intentions. It would require proof that beings could change. That species capable of atrocity could also be capable of redemption. Looking at the Kitharan battlecruiser still threatening her ship, Elena made a decision that would define the future of consciousness communication in the galaxy. Elena made the most difficult decision of her career. Instead of trying to protect the entities from the Kitharans, she chose to invite Commander Thex aboard the synthesis to witness the healing process directly. You're insane, Dr. Okafor said when Elena explained her plan. The moment he sees how the communication works, he'll try to weaponize it. Maybe, Elena agreed, but the entities will never trust any healing attempt while they know their tormentors are still out there, still threatening. The only way to truly heal them is to show them that even the Kitharans can change. 2 hours later, Commander Thex stood in the synthesis's consciousness communication chamber, his cybernetic implants twitching with barely contained aggression. Around him, Elena's team worked with equipment that represented the pinnacle of cooperative technology. Human engineering enhanced by Silvani biotechnology and Christek harmonic mathematics. This is your great secret? Thex sneered. Elaborate toys and meditation? Elena ignored his contempt, focusing instead on the readings from the 3 catatonic entities. Commander, before we begin, I need you to understand what you're about to experience. Your empire used these entities as weapons for 1,000 years. The psychic trauma they suffered is beyond anything in our medical databases. They are tools, Thex said dismissively. Tools do not feel trauma. You're about to learn otherwise, Elena said quietly. She activated the communication array, and immediately the chamber filled with the entity's pain. Centuries of forced participation in genocide. The agony of consciousness turned against its own nature, the slow death of hope. Thex staggered, his face contorting as the entity's suffering hit him with full force. For the first time in his life, the commander was experiencing the emotional cost of his empire's actions from the victim's perspective. Make it stop, he gasped, reaching for his weapon. I can't, Elena said, though she was struggling with the psychic feedback herself. This is what your empire did to them. This is the pain they've been carrying for 1,000 years. Through the communication link, Elena projected her intentions toward the entities. Not words, but pure emotional truth. The desire to heal, to help, to offer relationship without exploitation. But she also projected something else. The image of Thex himself, struggling with the first empathy he had ever felt. The response from the entities was immediate skepticism. They had learned that consciousness was capable of deception, that beings could project false emotions to manipulate them. They needed proof that change was possible. Elena made her gamble. Through the communication array, she opened her own memories to the entities, showing them the transformation of Verdania, the cooperation between former enemies, the healing of wounds thought permanent. But more than that, she showed them her own journey from a simple researcher to someone who had learned to see consciousness as sacred. The entities studied her memories with intense focus, analyzing them for deception. Finding none, they began to respond with cautious interest. For the first time in centuries, they allowed themselves to hope that consciousness could be something other than a tool for destruction. But their attention was drawn to Thex, who was still reeling from his first experience of genuine empathy. Through the psychic link, the entities could see into the commander's mind, witnessing the slow cracking of assumptions that had defined his entire existence. This cannot be real, Thex whispered, tears streaming down his scarred face. The things we did, the worlds we destroyed. I felt their fear. I felt them die. Elena realized that the entities were using the communication link to show Thex the true cost of his empire's actions, not just the physical destruction, but the psychic trauma inflicted on conscious beings across the galaxy. The commander was experiencing the accumulated suffering of 1,000 years of conquest. Commander, Elena said gently, the entities need to know that change is possible. They need to see that even those who hurt them can learn to choose differently. Thex looked up at her with eyes that held more pain than Elena had thought possible. How does one seek forgiveness for genocide? Through the communication array, Elena felt the entity's attention sharpen. This was the moment that would determine whether healing was possible, not just for the entities themselves, but for the entire galaxy's understanding of consciousness and responsibility. You start by acknowledging the truth of what you've done, Elena said. Then you choose to do better. Thex straightened, his military training warring with his newfound empathy. Slowly, painfully, he turned toward the communication array and spoke directly to the entities his empire had tortured. I am sorry, he said, the words coming out like broken glass. I did not understand that you could suffer. I thought you were just power to be used. I was wrong. The response from the entities was a wave of complex emotions, surprise, skepticism, cautious hope, and beneath it all, a desperate desire to believe that their suffering had not been meaningless. Elena felt tears streaming down her face as she realized what was happening. The entities were not just considering forgiveness, they were choosing to model it. By showing mercy to their greatest tormentor, they were demonstrating the kind of consciousness they wanted to see in the galaxy. We have been angry, one of the entities communicated through harmonics that made the entire ship resonate. Anger has been our protection, but also our prison. Perhaps it is time to choose differently. Over the following hours, Elena guided the most complex healing session ever attempted, not just healing the entity's trauma, but helping them process centuries of anger and pain. Thex remained throughout, serving as both witness and participant in the transformation. The commander's presence was crucial. The entities needed to see that their former tormentor could change, that consciousness was capable of growth even after committing atrocities. In return, Thex experienced a complete transformation of his understanding of power and purpose. "My empire will not accept this," Thex said finally, as the healing session reached its conclusion. "They will see my changed perspective as weakness." "Then perhaps it's time for your empire to learn new definitions of strength," Elena suggested. "The entities are willing to work with any consciousness that approaches them with respect rather than demands. That kind of partnership is more powerful than any weapon." The healing of the Kithra entities became the turning point for galactic civilization. Within a year, 17 different species had successfully made contact with consciousness entities in their regions. Each success created a ripple effect, inspiring other species to examine their own approaches to consciousness and cooperation. Commander Thex returned to his empire as an advocate for transformation rather than conquest. His influence led to a gradual but fundamental change in Kithran society, proving that even the most militaristic civilizations could evolve beyond their violent origins. Elena continued her work, traveling from system to system, helping species learn to communicate with the consciousness entities that had been waiting patiently for them to mature enough for true partnership. Each success built on the last, creating a network of cooperative consciousness that spanned the galaxy. But perhaps most importantly, the healing of Kithera proved that no consciousness was beyond redemption. No trauma too deep to heal, and no species too set in their ways to change. The human gift for building bridges had become the foundation for a new kind of galactic civilization, one built on cooperation rather than conquest, on healing rather than exploitation. Elena often returned to Verdania, where the first healing had taken place. Standing in the forest where it all began, she would listen to the songs of consciousness that now echoed. Across the galaxy, a harmony of different voices working together to create something beautiful and lasting. The human maiden had indeed mended what centuries had shattered, but in doing so, she had discovered that the real healing had just begun.